You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. Okay, listeners, welcome back to the newest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, we have a really exciting interview lined up with two different members over at the team Tonic. So first, we have Dusty Fields, the mobile lead over at Tonic. Second, we have Lauren Linzer, the director of solutions over at Tonic. So Lauren, Dusty, thank you for coming on the show. It's great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Our pleasure. Before we jump in, tell us a little about Tonic. What does Tonic do?
Yeah, Tonic is a development agency in short, but we do quite a bit around here. We really run the gamut when it comes to types of technology that we build, but everything is really custom. And the design and strategy of how we go about creating this technology to the development, our team is pretty agnostic when it comes to the technology that they support and the platforms that we work on. But the other thing that's really special about us is that we really have a focus on impact. When we were founded about 9 years ago, our founder really had the vision in mind of creating an agency that was centered around creating impact for our employees and our customers, and then also the world at large. So we're actually recently a certified B Corporation, that official stamp that we are impact-based. And the other cool thing about us is that for a technology agency, the fact that we're woman-owned is pretty cool too.
Awesome. One of the things I've been so excited about having the two of you on the podcast about is we're going to take a slightly different approach, and we're going to talk about how a potential e-commerce business might actually consider investing in various technology solutions. We're going to get pretty granular on how to go about approaching that. Before we jump into some of those more like technical questions, what are a few examples of maybe different types of technology that an e-commerce business might consider investing in?
Yeah, there's several new technologies coming out, and there's actually a big wave of technologies that we really want to pay attention to that's happening right now. But first, it might be something like updating your existing e-commerce website, your platform. It might be creating a mobile app to supplement your current website, or it could be AI. And that is such a huge subject that we're hearing a lot about today. But that's something that we're really excited about.
Along those lines, I could see a lot of good discussions with AI. Hopefully we can get into that today. We'll see if we can squeeze that into the discussion. But let's take the example of designing a mobile app. What I'd really love to do here is to play the role of potential customer coming to Tonic, trying to understand how should I go about thinking about my investment in this mobile app? How should I go about building it? And would love to just really provide that guidance for the audience that might be considering building out a mobile app or another type of technology. How does that sound to you two?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Awesome. First thing that comes to mind, I guess I'd love to understand from you, how should I go about thinking about maybe the potential value that my business could get out of designing this new like mobile application for my e-com business?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said it that way. What would the value be? Because before investing in technology, because the technology investment can be just that, an investment, a meaningful one at times. What are the goals? So that is something to ground on at first. Are you looking to add this technology platform or enhancement in order to increase your sales or conversion? Are you looking to create more engagement with your brand through maybe education or driving people to an experience in order to get more customers interacting with your brand? Or maybe it's a lead gen opportunity. So what is the thing that you're aiming to do that's going to bring you business? At the end of the day, that comes back to ROI. So what would that ROI look like for investing in this technology for your brand? And then also asking some other questions, maybe doing some research in the space to see how embracing technology could be a competitive differentiation for your business. So how can you take a look at what others in the industry are doing and maybe bring something that's fresh and new that will increase engagement and help you to meet those goals?
One of the things that you can also look into is identifying the pain points that your existing product has and how you want to enhance that and improve and fix those pain points. One of the things that mobile apps can do is make the buying process a lot easier for the user, having a mobile app in their pocket all the time. They can take it out, order a product on the fly. It might be something like not just buying and selling of a product, but it might be elevating that brand experience There's a really good example of a name brand product that's now on the Apple Vision Pro. That's really cool. It's really elevates their brand. It really changes the shopping experience. So you're not just going on a website, browsing a product, purchasing it, but you're actually picking it up virtually. You're moving it around. You're zooming in on it. The brand identity, the brand colors are surrounding you. So it really elevates that experience outside of a flat 2D screen.
So, Dusty, along those lines, let's give a product shout out there. Who's the brand that has put so many resources into that Apple Vision Pro experience already?
That would be Gucci. If you have a Vision Pro or can get access to an Apple Vision Pro, I highly recommend checking that app out. It starts out as what looks like just kind of a basic video about Gucci, about their new creative director. But as the video continues, it breaks out of that flat screen and there's sights and sounds moving all around you. And then it pauses at different times throughout the video and shows the products that Gucci is making. So then you can actually reach out, grab that product, hold it virtually in your hands, move it around, zoom in on it. So it's a really cool experience.
That is amazing. Wanted to hit on a point that both of you touched on there. Lauren, first of all, you brought up a great point that technology can be a big investment. Designing a mobile application experience, that's a big undertaking for a brand. But Dusty, to your point about Gucci, from what you described there, certainly it's Gucci. They're probably not going to build a scaled back version of their experience. They're going to go all out from day one. But for many of the listeners, they're probably going to be in a stage where maybe they don't need to build every single bell and whistle with their version one of their mobile application. Maybe they can start out with a smaller MVP, minimum viable product. For those businesses looking to build out the MVP, let's say for their mobile app, how should they start out thinking about that process?
Yeah. So for most businesses, this is going to be the on-ramp. While I wish as a shopper, all of these experiences were rooted in virtual reality and you could have that level of fidelity, it is a very meaningful investment to do something like that. And so for most, they'll have to start in a different place. And so the step one is really aligning on, what we call our scope, budget, time triangle. And I'm doing a triangle with my hands for listeners. But basically, this helps us to figure out what is going to be the appropriate starting point that fits within the timeline that is needed and the budget, which is oftentimes an even bigger driver. And so we ask questions like, let's think of the grandiose vision. Maybe you do want to create a future that looks like this Gucci app. Once we kind of get that future state in mind, we should dial it back and understand, but what is the core business reason you're creating the technology? And what is at the very basic core, what it needs to do? And what's nice about us understanding the big picture is that we can do something called future proof, which really allows us to build the app with that future vision in mind. And we can be aligned on those grander goals, but we can also continue to ground on what are the restraints that we have. Maybe there is a time constraint because there's a seasonality component, or maybe there's some other impending event coming. So we have to be really thoughtful about that development timeline. Or there's a budgetary constraint where maybe this is an effort to build something initially and then raise more capital in order to add more functionality and more cool features.
And it's really important to focus on building a really good foundation for your app or your product. Identify those core features that meet your immediate goals. Focus on those features, build a really good quality, because then that sets up, like Lauren mentioned, future proofing. That really sets up the opportunity for you to add those special brand features, maybe those virtual reality features in the future, but focus on building that core foundation. That way, it's going to help lower the amount of bugs that may happen during the building process and the launch process. But focusing on those core features will really help you with success in the future.
And for the listeners, are there maybe one or two questions that you could give them to really reflect on to help them decide what is a core feature versus maybe what is something that we roll out in version 3, version 4 that would be nice to haves, but not necessarily essentials?
Yeah, I think the first question I would ask is, does your meet the goal that you have in mind for MVP? Because that's going to set out the difference between, is this actually achieving the goal that you have, the pain point that users are experiencing, or is this just a nice to have that sounds really cool and really inspirational?
So let's shift gears and talk a little about, call it capabilities to build out the actual MVP. I'd love to hear your takes on how should businesses go about deciding whether it makes sense to hire a handful of in-house full-time employees to build out this technology for them versus maybe working with a technology agency like Tonic?
Yeah. So usually, if you're a small business, you probably don't have a very large technology team or a technology team at all. So that is a really fast starting point, is to work with a contractor or an agency. Now, if you are looking to have a technology business and you are hiring for the long term, you're going to have consistent technology projects for that team to work on. There could be a real justification to hiring in. But most companies in the beginning, especially, will lean on agencies in order to create a thing within a discrete period of time and then have that team available to support, maintain, to service the technology, but not necessarily have to worry about the expenses and the overhead that comes along with a full-time hire. The other thing that's nice about agencies is we just have the benefit of lots of different experiences. So we have been down the path of building lots of different things for other clients. And through that, we just learn. We build our knowledge on all kinds of use cases. Because one thing you'll find when you get into the world of custom technology is there are so many paths to take and so many different things that are out there. And so our team just has this breadth of experience that's really hard to find when you're hiring a single individual.
Yeah, that's super important. I want to reiterate what Lauren said there. In the agency world, you usually hire people from many different backgrounds and many different experiences. And every project I work on, there's so much that I learn from that project, including roadblocks, things that will slow down the project, any third-party tools that we may utilize, what are the pros and cons of those. And we take that knowledge in each project we work on from in the future there. We take that knowledge and bring it with us and really improve the process every time we're working on a new project.
Building upon what both you had said there, one of the just firsthand experiences that sticks out to me, at an earlier stage of our agency, we had invested in trying to build out what I would call like a micro SaaS business for the agency. It was something that my then business partner fully came up with the idea, and it's a brilliant idea to this day. What we did though with version 1, we ended up hiring, I would say, a less experienced contract developer. This developer built out what I would say was a very solid MVP. The roadblock that we ran into, though, is we realized that it wasn't really built out for scale. And Dusty, what you mentioned in particular with being able to work with agency folk and being able to benefit from all of the experiences that they learn from every single project they work on, it can be one of the downsides. If you work with, let's say, a less experienced contractor, that they're not necessarily going to have that insight of, oh, hey, this is just version 1. We're going to plan on needing this to scale out, not just for 5 customers, but for 500 customers or 5,000 customers down the road. We really need to build this in a much more sustainable manner. For our team, what we found is when we were building that out, the beta version worked great for the first 10 accounts that we signed up, but it was not at all scalable. So once we got 10 beta testers on, it was working great. We said, oh, we built something phenomenal. But then ultimately we realized, hey, if we want to scale this out, we really kind of need to scrap this original build and build version 2 of the MVP entirely from scratch.
Yeah, that's really important to note because it's not just about scalability in terms of number of users too, but you also want to future-proof your apps and your products too for things like localization, if you're expanding to other countries. Building the app, when I talk about that solid foundation, I'm talking about things like that where in the future you can add new languages to the experience. And even thinking about things that the client might not be thinking about, like if I want to introduce a right to left language, how does that affect my design? If I introduce that, is it going to mess up the app? So we think about those things as we build the app. We also think about accessibility as well, just making sure the app is inclusive for as many users as possible. Your 10 beta users may not be testing out accessibility features, but once you start expanding to a wider audience, those are things that you really need to think about when you're building your product.
I can fully foresee a scenario where Tonic has almost like a laundry list of, hey, here are, whether it's formally written out in bulleted form, or it's just that it's ingrained into every team member's mind, here are the 50 questions that we need to ask throughout the course of the relationship before we start the build to make sure that we're building out for the long term.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that's actually something that I was updating this morning before our call, is just making sure that, because one of the things that's happening too is next week, WWDC, which is Apple's big worldwide developer conference, they're coming out with a new operating system and they're going to be introducing a lot of new features, including a lot of new AI features too. So that's why I was updating is that checklist of questions that we need to ask, but also things that we need to think about when a new operating system comes out. Like, how are we going to beta test that? How are we going to ingest all the new features and think about those and test all those? So there's a lot of cool stuff that's happening around that.
So I want to talk a little about, let's say, like specifically the mobile application build process. And I'm assuming at least that there are a dozen different project management methodologies you could go through, a dozen different ways you can structure it. Maybe to keep the answer a little bit more narrow, how would Tonic go about approaching that? Like, are there specific almost like phases of the project that I should expect to experience? Or is it just that, hey, I'm going to send you a list of 20 core features that I need, and 6 months later, you're going to have a finished product that's ready to go to market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of parts there. At a very high level, we structure our projects similarly when we're building a greenfield custom solution that's brand new. We always start with UX design. That is a great, like what you guys are talking about with the checklist of all the things that we're asking. We really start asking those questions from day one because we really want to make sure that we're designing the app in a way that's going to align with the vision. We're also making sure that we're designing the app from the very beginning in a way that aligns with the time, budget, scope. So really kind of keeping what is the core goal of the app? What are the primary features that we're going to be focusing on? And then how are we going to make choices in doing that fits within that time and budget constraint that may exist? We'll also have a project manager that's overseeing all of this. So in the very beginning, as we do this design review and start capturing feedback from the client, we will have others present, a project manager that's keeping track of everything going on in the project, managing the internal team, managing all of the steps that we take and breaking them down, and then keeping communication frequent with our customers. Once the design process is going, we will create a low fidelity but high level map of the whole journey, all the pages that exist, but kind of like boxes, squares, and black and white words. And then they start really putting high fidelity to that. And that's where it starts to come to life. And visually, you start to see what this app's going to look like. And then from there, may already have a backend developer involved as they build out the backend architecture, making sure we can support that, whatever it may look like. And once we finish the design, we then hand off to a front-end engineer who's going to be building out everything that exists on those pages from an imagery standpoint is now going to be transferred into code. So it actually is a living, breathing, working thing. And then once we've built the app, the last step that we always save a good amount of time for is the feedback loop with our quality assurance team. Now, quality assurance is included within all of our engagements and actually is there from the beginning too, because they're really good at breaking stuff, but also anticipating what could break. So we're getting that feedback loop constantly, but they really double down in that last phase to make sure that we're finding bugs, we're making sure that the app works as it's supposed to, we're fixing those bugs. And then we're also doing some security hardening, making sure that it's ready to go for the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then we really initiate that relationship with Apple and Google to launch the app. We kind of take care of all the back and forth and make sure that the app is going to get approved. And then we kind of hold our clients' hands through the process once they launch and make sure that they know where to go from here. So that's really the process. But when it comes to handing over a feature list and saying, good luck, that's something that we definitely don't do. But we hear that story a lot. Feature lists seem objective and clear, but actually there's so much nuance and gray to them. So it's a very collaborative process to define those features at a really granular level, capturing the requirements from our clients, but also having that creative authority to make recommendations. So we're building it in a way that also is, again, I'll say it many times, but comes back to the time and materials we've allotted, that budget and time consideration, and really do this collaboratively as much as like twice a week, meeting with our clients to give them updates and get their feedback and answer questions and ask questions and all of that. It definitely is a highly collaborative process that goes well beyond a bulleted checklist of features.
Yeah. And when you're vetting companies, I think it's really important to ask, as a client, do I get to see and talk to the engineers and the designers who are building this product? Because that's one of the things that's really unique about Tonic is that our engineers are always on the calls with the clients. They're not just working through the project manager. So there's a lot of advantages to that where they get to see and hear the successes that the engineers are having, They also hear the pain points that the engineers may be running into, and then really have this partnership where the engineer may say, you know what, I'm having a really difficult time implementing this feature because there's this roadblock here. Can we go a different way, and really work with the client on there so that as the client, you're really involved in that build process. And so it's not like, you're sending over, like you said, sending over that bulleted list and then never hear from anyone until it's ready to deliver the product. You're actually part of that build process, which is really special.
And to your point, that strikes me as something that is probably very unique amongst technology agencies. I know like most engineers that I've had the pleasure of working with are brilliant at what they do, but getting them on a client call is like pulling teeth. I wanted to ask, because both of you had really touched on the point of like very hands-on client involvement. Let's say I'm playing that role of client, we're building the application together. What would be a good expectation for me to set for myself in terms of how involved I'm going to be, whether it's over the next 3 months, the next 6 months? Is that monthly phone calls where we're touching base with the engineers, project manager? We'd love to better understand what that looks like.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. Definitely that first month is the most important in that level of involvement being really high. And also depending on who the decision makers are in the business, making sure that all that representation is there. We've definitely run into the situation where there are differing opinions within the business and going down a path of designing the app, and then other stakeholders get involved and that changes the vision, and that just costs more time and materials within the process. And so really preparing to be very involved in the beginning of the process, that first month or two, and then onward as much as possible. And we know that people are busy and it's hard to get on multiple calls a week, but just as much as possible, having that feedback loop is super useful for us. So at the very least, maybe once a week after we get past the design phase and being able to jump on and do a stand-up just to hear how things are tracking, if there's been any changes, answer any questions. So we really like to have that communication. And then ongoing, we also communicate through Slack. So there's a channel that's set up and all the parties on both sides are in there. So that also makes it a little bit easier to just exchange a quick message back and forth to make sure that those quick questions are getting answered so we can keep driving forward and don't get held up in the process.
I love it. So if I'm building a mobile application, are there any platforms that maybe I could build on that I can kind of use as a crutch, or does it make more sense to build it entirely custom, entirely from scratch?
It depends on your needs. So if there is you're building an app that's kind of a throwaway app, you're using it for a short term for an event, say, and then once the event is over, you're never going to use that app again. Then it'd be great to go to like a no code solution or a templated type of app product that you can quickly build the app, do what you need to do, as long as it's nothing that's really custom featured, and then just use it for the event and then you're done with it. But anything that you want to build custom, like any type of functions or features that you don't see in a lot of apps today, or something that's really unique to your backend system or really unique to your brand, then that's where you want to go and seek out a custom build solution. And there's a couple different approaches that we take when building apps. We can go, if you want the highest quality, the best type of app you can get, you'll want your agency to build the app for native iOS and native Android. And that's using, and I'm getting just a little bit technical here, but that's using Swift code on iOS and Kotlin or Java on Android. If you want to go with a little bit cheaper option, but still well supported out there, we also recommend going with a cross-platform solution, which allows you to have one code base for both iOS and Android. There's a few downsides to that. You're not getting all the latest, greatest features that Apple and Google may release to you, but it is a better solution when you can have just one code base. Usually in React Native is a popular cross-platform solution that you can write in JavaScript. A lot of people today know JavaScript, so it's really easy to find engineers to support that. And then there's other solutions like Flutter, which isn't as well supported as React Native, but there's a lot of options there for you.
Yeah, and I'll jump in to add that when making that decision of to build custom or to go with an existing platform, really, I think what is a good hallmark to think about is there are solutions out there that already have been built that you can plug and play. Basically, add your logo and add a couple of customizations, and there you go, you're off to the races. but it's very limited in that flexibility. So if you have a vision for really what you are trying to create, you're going to have to fit within a pretty tight box when using those different solutions. And sometimes it can be a little bit of both, where maybe there is something that is pre-built that can be integrated into the app's experience. So we're not building everything from scratch, but you still have that very custom feel. So there's definitely that like hybrid approach that does allow some cost savings, but also allows a bit of customization.
And I just want to add a quick note for the audio only listeners at this point that just a moment ago when Dusty was giving his response, he had the coolest reaction where in the middle of getting super granular on mobile app development, one of his AirPods fell out. He caught it and stuck it in his ear again without skipping a beat. It was amazing. Oh, man. Dusty, well done. That was super cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm quick like that.
But back to the questions, there's one other question I really wanted to get into today, and that is talking a little about like external funding sources. Certainly some listeners are going to be in a state where their business is profitable enough that they can take a certain percentage of cash that they have sitting in the bank and they can put it right into that mobile app development. For those listeners that maybe are looking to take on a form of external funding for that, what advice would you give to those listeners about how to approach investors and how to start thinking about that external funding source system?
Yeah, that's really important. We often run across this challenge with our clients, especially when they're starting a brand new business and don't have that revenue stream yet. Building custom technology can be something that is in the range of $50,000, $75,000 to $100,000 or more thousand. And usually people don't have that money just sitting around. So finding some external sources is something that is an important consideration. And it really depends. Coming back to MVP, there may be a comfortable investment level to build out that MVP solution. And then that can actually be leveraged to raise more capital. It sounds kind of ironic or counterintuitive. Sometimes oftentimes in technology, the best way to raise capital for your technology is to already have it existing. And so at least having something built that is built well, high quality, and shows off the general functionality you're looking for. And maybe even that proof of concept can have some data attached to it. If it's been out there in a beta launch, maybe you have a revenue stream that you can validate. Bringing that to the table with investors is very powerful. And then along with that, a really powerful, really being able to showcase what is going to be the go-to-market strategy. How are you going to acquire clients? How are you going to see revenue year over year? Having those questions answered and having it demonstrated really well definitely helps your case when you're up against sitting in front of investors. If you don't have those questions answered, it may not be as successful. And there's also other options out there besides working with investors. There are business loan opportunities. There's other ways to create payment plans. So there are other options, but oftentimes raising capital and working with investors is a pretty common path when it's a new business and you're building a pretty meaningfully sized piece of technology.
Well, I'm trying to think. I guess from here, I would just broadly ask the question for listeners that want to get in touch with Tonic to just talk about new technology projects. What's the best way for them to approach you?
Yeah, I mean, call me. So we are happy to talk to anyone, honestly. Like I love having a conversation, even if it's just to validate, does my technology solution make sense in the world? Like, is this something, can you poke some holes for me? Dusty and I get on several calls where we will poke holes and help to validate and help maybe think about some of the edge cases or the parts of the app that may have unintentional consequences. So we can be there to support them in that and to give some high-level estimations on what it may cost to do something. We do have a process that we go through in the beginning where we ask lots of questions. We try to understand what is the functionality that you're aiming for, what are the must-haves, and then sketch out some timelines around what we think it's going to take from a resource perspective in order to give a range. So there's a good idea of what the level of investment is going to look like for something like this. So yeah, we would be happy to talk to anyone to have that conversation, see if it could be something that we could be helpful with, make sure it's viable, and go from there.
So Lauren, for those listeners, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So you can go to our website and there's an easy contact us form on the hellotonic.com, or you can get in touch with me directly. And Pat, if you're sharing contact information, I'm not sure after this podcast, but I would be happy to field any of those questions directly. Just let me know if you heard the podcast. That'll be helpful context for me.
And yeah, Lauren, to your point, we'll share your email. We'll share the link to the contact form in the show notes. So listeners, check that out if you do want to get in touch with the Tonic team. And then I guess I would just say, Dusty, Lauren, in general, outside of everything we've discussed today, are there any maybe other resources that you think would be really helpful for listeners that are looking into mobile app development right now?
Ooh, yeah, I would pay attention to any tech blogs or anything about what's happening with WWDC and what Apple's announcing. They're going to be coming out with a lot of great new features. Some of the popular blogs that I like to look at is TechCrunch or TechMeme. Those always have up-to-date information on the whole tech world as a whole, but also specifically there's some things on there about mobile app development as well.
Well, Dusty Fields, Lauren Linzer, both coming from Tonic. Thank you both for coming on the podcast today. This has been phenomenal having you.
Thanks, Pat. This has been so great. We're really excited to be here. Really happy to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.